How you doing, everybody? It's your boy Wardy, and we're back at it with a late night upload here December 15th, right around 1:10 a.m. Eastern at the time of recording this. So if you can make sure to smash that like and subscribe on as you're first chiming in, that's the easiest and best way to support the channel. And thank you all so much in advance. The grind never stops here, WardyNYM. We got to get more content to come out because I have to break down at thorough length beyond what I've already done in my live streams to this point, what the Mets will do, or what they should do rather, if they lose out on Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And I know no one wants to see Yamamoto go elsewhere, but we also have to kind of be mentally prepared should it be happening, should that scenario actually happen. And again, hopefully, fingers crossed, the Mets land the guy, but there's a great chance that he could end up going with the Yanks or going to the Dodgers or potentially somewhere else. So for us Mets fans, also level our expectations, one, but two, at least have an idea on the type of route the Mets plan to go down. That is what I'll be breaking down for you now. But before we get deeper into the video, I have to let you all know about today's video sponsor, that being our great friends at BetUS. BetUS is America's #1 sports book, and what they cooked up for me a couple days ago is something special because we all know Yoshinobu Yamamoto will be making his decision in hopefully the next 5 to 7 days or so right before Christmas, but we're got to find out who has the best odds to potentially land him outside of what the reporters are saying right now, which is all a lot of the same regurgitated nonsense, saying that the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yanks, in some way, some fashion, some form, are the top dogs. And even while that may be true, according to BetUS, they do have the Mets as the slight favorite at plus 200 here for the Metropolitans. Then they have the Yanks and Dodgers right behind them at plus 300 apiece. This was prior to the Tyler Glasnow trade happening, so I'd have to imagine this may change a little bit, because don't get me wrong, the Dodgers still love Yamamoto, but I have a feeling they have a harder line in the sand now. There's a little bit less desperation than before to acquire the $300+ million star, which is what it's going to take to land Yamamoto's services. With the Boston Red Sox at plus 400, the Giants at plus 500. So if you want to get in on the action, if you love doing your over, your unders, you're doing your spreads, you're doing your parlays, especially unique WardyNYM parlays we'll be doing throughout the regular season next year here with BetUS for Mets games, make sure to check them out. Clicking the link down below and you get 125% boost with your first deposit. So if you deposit $100, you automatically get $225. It's that easy. And again, shout out to BetUS for being a sponsor of today's video. But now let's jump back into this one, folks, because again, we're talking about Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And yes, if the Mets are not going to land this guy, which we all hope he does land here, how are they going to pivot? What are the proper moves? Well, we've heard a lot of different things. We've heard, okay, the Mets are going to pivot to Blake Snell, according to Jim Bowden of The Athletic, which is more than likely not going to happen. We've heard about, okay, the Mets and Yankees are two teams interested in Shota Imanaga as a pivot. That makes a level of sense. The Mets love Jordan Montgomery. He feels like their plan B option should they lose out on Yamamoto. All these things are true and some isn't. So let's get into what we know to this point and how us Mets fans should feel about these potential options should Yamamoto go elsewhere. Starting with Jordan Montgomery, Monty, in my opinion, is one of the best starters available out there. He is personally on my #2 list of starting pitchers available, right below Jordan Montgomery. Yes, I have him higher than Blake Snell for reasons I'm about to get into. And yes, I have him higher than even Shota Imanaga, because while Shota Imanaga has a lot of talent and a lot of upside, Monty just won a World Series, playing time with two different teams. He's faced a lot of adversity in his career, has looked very strong as a middle-of-the-rotation starter every fifth day for the New York Yankees for a number of years. He understands what it's like not only to win, but to be a part of a big market and have success in doing so. So for more reasons than one, Jordan Montgomery is coming off of a career-best season with ERA, with innings pitched around 180. He makes so much sense for the Mets, but I think the biggest hurdle could be two things. One, it's the Boston Red Sox. You know, Monty is living in Boston so far this offseason, in part because of his girlfriend and her workplace. But two, if Monty is looking for, you know, a Carlos Rodon contract at 6 years, $160+ million, while I personally can understand why that's a solid price point given the market, and also understanding that before we know it, middle of the rotation starters, getting them closer to $150 million than $200 million is going to come off like a bargain after next year's offseason when all those star-studded pitchers available. The market's going to continue to rise, so I do think that's a fairly fair price point for Monty, but he doesn't have any overwhelming stuff. He's just known for the nasty off-speed, love the movement on those pitches, and he's going to give you around a solid 6 innings every single time out there, but he doesn't really overwhelm you with too much, so I can understand the reservations to being like, I really don't want to go past 125 over 5 or something along those lines. So to what degree the Mets will be willing to go down this route will be interesting. Excuse me for that one. And no, we're not cutting it out. We're just going right to the chase. This is a late night video. There will be no editing in this one beyond what you see. But getting back into Monty, you have to wonder how much desperation would the Mets have if they lose out on Yamamoto and invest that amount of money into Monty. I think Steve Cohen and Stearns are going to be very strategic about this. Their whole point is to not act in an Artie Moreno type fashion where if you miss out on key fish in an area of need, you don't just go and spend elsewhere just for the sake of spending. They're going to be far more strategic and understanding in that regard than years past for the Mets under Steve Cohen, and Monty still has been at the tippity top of their list after Yamamoto. So if there's a guy that feels like close to a lock where the Mets at least will do everything in their power to land, should they not land Yamamoto, I would put Montgomery right there at the top of the list. But now let's get into a guy who I firmly believe is never going to be a New York Met, at least not in the foreseeable future, and that is Blake Snell. Blake Snell is coming off of a Cy Young award-winning season with the San Diego Padres, has the award with both the Tampa Bay Rays and the San Diego Padres. That's a really impressive thing to do in both leagues. However, Snell, if you look at his underlying numbers, his advanced numbers as well, expected ERA, SI ERA, the guy might have had just over a 2 ERA throughout the season, but his expected numbers were like around 3.77. Like, he had a lot of luck on his side. His walk rate around almost a 5 walks per 9. That leaves quite a bit to be desired. And for Snell to be in a higher market right now, given the fact that he just won the Cy Young and knowing that the pitching market isn't deep whatsoever, it's very top heavy. You have Yamamoto, there's a gap. You have Blake Snell, there's a gap. Then you have the Imanagas, the Montgomerys of the world, and everyone else. So Snell does have the upper hand at coming off of a strong season, at face value. But when you really look at the numbers, as great as his stuff can be at times, and it really can with that nasty slider, there is still quite a bit to be desired there on a long-term deal. And he has a QO attached to him, so you'd have to be giving up a draft pick. There's a lot of reasons as to why I do not foresee Blake Snell landing in Queens this offseason in the scenario that the Mets do not land Yamamoto. I think that they could do far better by going with these middle type options and Montgomery, Imanaga, etc., and getting so much better production at a better budget. Not that they need a ball in a budget, but I do not believe Blake Snell is going to ultimately be deserving of a contract. If he's looking north of $200 million, I say see you later, have fun with that elsewhere. If he's looking closer to 100, then I think there's a bit of a different discussion, but I personally wouldn't even want to consider anything past 4 or 5 years for the 31-year-old, knowing how deep of a pitching market it is, as already is looking for the 2024-2025 offseason. So that's just my thoughts there on Snell and what we know at this point. And then last but not least, Shota Imanaga, that we've talked about plenty on the channel already. Again, reports came out over this past night that the Yanks view him as a plan B option as well. And the Mets have been in on Imanaga really since the beginning. They scouted him throughout the season through the MPB, in part because of guys like Billy Epper. Since then, David Stearns has done his due diligence, and the belief, according to rival executives, is that the Mets are going full bore for Yamamoto and Imanaga. I think it's shooting for the stars to imagine the Mets could land both these guys, but at minimum, if they could land Imanaga, I don't think I'd be opposed to that whatsoever. Just had a 2.8 ERA in the MPB this past season. The guy has some nasty off-speed pitches and breaking balls as well. His biggest issue, however, has been his home run rate. Yoshinobu Yamamoto only gave up 2 home runs this past season. Was not the case with Imanaga. He was known for giving up the long ball, so that's something he would try to certainly figure out and rectify at the MLB level so he can profile better than, a middle to back end starter, which is how he currently looks so far to kickstart his career before hitting the bigs in 2024. So now the question is, okay, the Mets land at least one of these 3 guys. What do they do from there? Great question. Pretty much if the Mets land Snell, Montgomery, or Imanaga, because I don't foresee them landing 2 out of those 3, even though that would be awesome in itself, so I won't write it off. Anything's possible with Steve Cohen and David Stearns, but I think with the Mets being as wary as they are with the price points of these pitchers and knowing the type of market we have next year as is, it's certainly going to come into the decision-making that they have. So let's say they land Jordan Montgomery. After Jordan Montgomery, I believe that they'll stop with just a short-term Luis Severino type option. A guy that you're spending anywhere between 10 to 15 mil AAV on a 1-year deal, maybe with a 2nd-year option, and just seeing what they can give you during that span. Like a Lucas Giolito, I anticipate is going to get a bigger contract that he deserves as well. But if you kind of keep in mind the Lucas Giolitos, the Severinos, just those types where, there are some concerns, but there's also upside, and they may also have age on their side if the Mets are not safe for seeing a grizzled vet like a Rich Hill, for example. point I'm trying to make is that if they land any of these middle rotation type starters, even though of course you could label Blake Snell as that ace caliber, after that you're probably looking at one more depth piece and that'll do. Now, could the Mets of course go through different options in the trade market? Absolutely, but they have showed a reluctance to trade for starters that are rentals. Now, in the case of Tyler Glasnow just being traded to the Dodgers, why was that a trade that made sense for both teams? The Dodgers gave up a solid return there to the Tampa Bay Rays, and they themselves returned to Glasnow, who's in the final stages of signing an extension. So that's where things make more sense to give up solid prospect capital, which is certainly what the Dodgers did there in that trade headlined by Pepio, or Pepiot, however you say the guy's name. But now getting back into how the Mets are operating, they certainly can be in the market for a pitcher with multiple years of control, say Freddie Peralta, even though I don't anticipate he'd be available for Milwaukee among many other middle rotation starters out there with upside. It's still easiest to address things in the free agent market for now, with them still trying to build on the future for 2025, 2026, and so on and so forth. So that is my full belief and understanding to this point. For those that have been questioning, wondering, and asking me, Wardy, what is the best plan for the Mets if they properly pivot? Is Blake Snell the guy? Is Montgomery the guy? Is Imanaga the guy? And my answer again is 2 out of 3 I would agree with. Blake Snell is the one where I just have a hard time falling in love with, which is crazy to say, knowing how uber talented he is, just coming off of his Cy Young Award. But again, those advanced numbers tell me a lot that I feel like I need to know when evaluating a guy that's looking for north of $200 million, and I just don't foresee that aging well, nearly to the liking versus other guys, say a year from now, whether that's a Corbin Burns, whether that's a Max Fried, whether that is a plenty other of these big names, a Zach Wheeler, for example. Could we see a return of him in Queens a year from now? Anything's possible, and the Mets are weighing those options when evaluating both this season, next, and beyond. So Mets fans, whoever you're a fan of, let me know your thoughts down below. What was your biggest takeaway? What do you think the Mets should do as the best pivot, or plan rather, if they lose out on Yamamoto? Again, it's impossible to have the best plan, the best plan B, whatever it may be, because Yamamoto is a unicorn like Ohtani in his own right. He's just on another level talent-wise that unfortunately there's really no one else out there in the free agent or trade market that you can really compare with at a reasonable level. Even with the uncertainty behind Yamamoto, he's just so unbelievably talented that he's being deemed as potentially a top 5 pitcher in MLB before he's even signed with a club. That's how good the guy is, and that is exactly why the Mets are going to continue to do everything humanly possible in their power and that they possibly can to make it happen. Whether it happens or not, we have yet to find out, but Steve Cohen, David Stearns, it will not be for lack of effort. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Stay tuned for another live stream probably later today at the time of recording this, and of course over the weekend. Anything regarding the Mets, we'll be covering it right away, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.